Words, I put this out of somewhere, I got it somewhere, and I liked it. It says Texans have long held the reputation of just telling it like it is. This offends a few people. How about that tone? Along the way. But you know, we've got to stand for the truth. It's time we bring the truth and straight talk back to Washington. These are people destroying the country. Louie Gohmert has sworn to protect and love his country with all his heart. And now it's time to stand up no matter who gets offended. Louie, come here. This guy right here, you know, there's a rumor going around in Washington, D.C. that he has our speaker kind of upset a little bit. Mr. Boehner's upset a little bit. Well, you know what? I have a suggestion, Louie. I know that we'd like to see Boehner upset a little more, but why don't you go over and help Ted Cruz and shake up Harry Reid?
Thank you. Wow, it's great to be here. As always, it's good to be back in Texas. I just flew back from the northern echelons this morning. Just feels better back here, you know? Yeah. And I've had my daughters tell me I need to be careful about my tone too. And I do appreciate good humor. True story from a judge friend of mine said he was at a legal seminar down in Austin, and he was staying at a hotel there downtown that he thought had the best free breakfast each morning. Well, we know nothing's free. It's part of the price of the room, but he liked their breakfast. And he noticed there was a church bus from one of our East Texas towns. Actually, it was Crockett. And he said a bunch of their senior citizens were there for some kind of meeting. And he was behind a bunch of them in line. And one guy was standing there holding 2 plates in line, and the plates were already full, and a friend of his turned around behind, that was in front of him, turned around behind and said, "Don't you know eating like that'll kill you?" And the man said, "I'll have you know my grandfather lived to be 95. He said, "Really? Your grandfather lived to 95 eating like that?" And he said, "No, he did it by minding his own business." Now, I grew up in Mount Pleasant. I had people I went to high school with said, "Louie, I don't care what the government does as long as they stay out of my business." Well, guess what? If you don't care what the government does, they're going to be all in your business, and the only way to keep them out is the way the designers intended, and that is that you are the government. You decide what gets done. You go to jury duty. You decide who's convicted, how long people go to prison. And if you think that doesn't matter, try serving on jury duty enough, and you'll find defendants in Texas have a choice. You go to the judge or go to the jury. You find out the jury's doing their job when more people start asking for the judge, and then the judge gets a stronger backbone as well. That's justice in Texas. That's the way it was intended. And that's not all. The founders intended that the people would be the government, and the way that worked is there'd be a hiring day every so often, and they expected everybody would want to read every resume, interview the candidates, and talk to them, figure out who's going to be the best servant to do what we intend to have done in Washington or in Austin or in the local government. That's the only way it will work. And we have gotten weaker as a result of not enough people doing their jobs. Just like Pastor Rick, Pastor Broad, you're awesome. Stephen, thank you. And you're dead on, both of you. I mean, the church is where things need to change, and I'm sick and tired of seeing people try to rewrite history. The left-wing blocs, bless their heart, I'm sure they got a good public education, so they don't understand the real founding of this country. Or perhaps they grew up in Indonesia and they don't understand the real founding of this country. But we owe it to them as caring Americans to make sure they get the truth. So let me point out a couple of things. First of all, of course, we're here in the shadow of the IRS building. And I want to read just a comment. And this didn't come from a source I would normally think of reading from, but it is from the Gannett Washington Bureau, USA Today. I don't normally quote from them, but here's a couple of paragraphs. It's talking about the IRS scandal, and they say, unlike the way Tea Party applications were handled, George wrote, there were no instructions on how to refer cases that met the progressive criteria. Quote, we found no indication that progressives was a term used to refer cases for scrutiny for political campaign intervention, unquote. They go on to say in this article, quote, in total, 30% of the organizations we identified with the word progress or progressive in their names were processed as potential political cases. In comparison, our audit found that 100% of the tax-exempt applications with Tea Party, Patriots, 912 in their names were processed as potential political cases during the audit's time frame. 100%. The IRS got used as a political weapon. The IRS has been weaponized by this administration.
Yes.
Just so you get it, I know you do or you wouldn't be here, but in case it's somebody that wandered up that doesn't understand, this from the Wall Street Journal. They asked the question, Peggy Noonan asked the question that so many did in 2012. Quote, where was the Tea Party, unquote? Well, the article says they were not the fierce force they'd been in the 2010 cycle when Republicans took back the House. Some of us think the answer to the question is they were targeted by the IRS, buried under paperwork, and unable to raise money. The economist Stan Fogger on the American Enterprise Institute takes the question a step further. The Democrats have been badly shaken by the Republican comeback in 2010. Remember, that was a Tea Party comeback. They feared a repeat in 2012 and they would lose the White House. Might targeting the Tea Party groups, diverting them, keeping them from forming and operating, seem a shrewd campaign strategy in the years between 2010 and 2012? Sure, underhanded and illegal, but potentially effective. Fogger writes, it is a well-known fact the Tea Party movement dealt the president his famous shellacking in the 2010 midterm elections. Less well-known is the actual number of votes this new movement delivered, and the continuing effects these votes could have had in 2012 had the movement not been demobilized by the IRS. The research paper and his colleagues have put out notes that the Tea Party movement's huge success in 2010 was not the result of a few days of work by an elected official or two, but involved activists all over the country who spent the year and a half leading up to the midterm elections volunteering, organizing, donating, rallying. Much of these grassroots activities were centered around 501c4s, which according to our research were an important component of the Tea Party movement and its rise. The bottom line is that the Tea Party movement, when properly activated, can generate huge number of votes, more votes in 2010 in fact, than the vote advantage Obama held over Romney in 2012. The data show that the Tea Party groups continue to grow at the pace seen in 2009-2010, and had their effect on the 2012 vote been similar to that scene in 2010, they would have brought the Republican Party as many as 5 to 8.5 million votes compared to Obama's margin of victory of 5 million. Think about the sheer political facts of the president's 2012 victory. The first thing we learned in the weeks after the voting was that the Obama campaign was operating with a huge edge in its technological operation, its vast digital capability and sophistication. Second thing we learned the past month is while the campaign was on, the president's fiercest foes in the Tea Party were being thwarted, diverted, and stopped. Ladies and gentlemen, that has to stop. And it has to stop now. Any agency that gets weaponized and used as a government arm to help someone get elected has to go. And Americans, over 60%, are with us on the issue. Finally, they're getting it. So what do we do in Congress? We can't control what comes to the floor in the Senate, so naturally the Senate wanted to change the message, change the discussion, because 70% of Americans were with us. Let's get rid of the IRS. It's time for everybody to pay their fair share. I like a flat tax, some like a fair tax. Either way, we can get rid of the IRS. It was time. The movement's there. So what did our speaker do? It's time to bring up immigration. Here we have the framework of this incredible building of democracy, a democratic republic. And the framework is being eaten away over a long period of time. And finally, over 60% of Americans have had the curtains pulled back, have had the sheetrock pulled down, and they see the erosion, the termite damage. They see the framework threatened. And now our leaders in both parties want to talk about how many guests we have in our house while the house is about to fall down around them. It's time to fix the damage. Then we can worry about the guests. There should be one bill on immigration passed in the House, and it wouldn't even be a bill, it would be a resolution. And I have that resolution. Encourage people to get on board. It says, after a bunch of whereases, basically, the president has the money he needs. He's got the people he needs. He's got the wherewithal, everything he needs to secure the border. Resolved, when the president secures the border as confirmed by the 4 border states, then we'll get a comprehensive immigration bill done, but not before. Then we find out the NSA has been spying on Americans. And we're told, oh, Congress knew all about that. Well, I'm on the Judiciary Committee, have since I've been there. Been on the Crime, Terrorism, Homeland Security Committee. I've gone to classified briefings. I've gone and spent hours examining documents that most of the people in Congress did not. And I'm telling you, I didn't find anything about the kind of invasion the NSA has been doing. And also, Pastor, I love you and I appreciate you, and you're right about the invasion. With regard to the FAA, I was okay for keeping the FAA alive so they can run our airports, keep planes landing safely. But when I saw, and it doesn't say 30,000 drones in the bill, but when you read the language, you realize, and other reports, it could be that many or more. Then an overwhelming group of Republicans voted against the FAA bill. There were 12 of us. Just because we didn't see drones having a place. And I did have a fellow, I believe he was from Georgia, tell me in Washington, hey, Congressman, don't let them restrict the number of rounds we can have in our guns, because we found where we live, in general, it takes about 50 rounds to bring down a drone. I didn't know if he was kidding or not, but I got into a debate back when I was Chief Justice in 2002. We had at one of our conferences a lawyer from the CIA, and she was Ivy League educated, and she and I got into a big debate. She said that since your bank has all your financial data, why shouldn't the federal government? I couldn't believe it. How badly eroded the Ivy League has become in their education. You don't know the answer to that? The bank can't put you in handcuffs and carry you off to jail. If you file bankruptcy, they can't do much about it. But the federal government can keep you from going through bankruptcy. They can put you in jail. They can do all kinds of things that no business can. And I can't believe we've got Ivy League educated people that don't understand that until I read Supreme Court opinions. And then you realize, wow, we have fallen so far in our ability to educate in some of what used to be the greatest schools in the nation. And then we have a war against religion going on. As Tony Perkins, Family Research Council told me this week when he and I were talking, he said, there's no doubt now the government has taken off the gloves in this war against religion. After this president got reelected, the people in his administration have made clear, you can't touch us, we're coming after religion, Christianity particularly. And so their decisions have made clear that at least to certain situations, there's no right to respect the Catholic ban on birth control or birth control procedures. There's no right not to aid and abet the killing of a child unborn. There's no right to pray in Jesus' name if you're a chaplain. There's no right to define marriage the way the Bible does and the way mankind does or has for most of our existence. And by the way, I just ask you this question to ponder. For someone who believes in evolution, you believe that throughout the history of the universe, and particularly Earth, that people have come together and born an offspring from different species that has evolved and given a stronger and better species. How does the mating of two males evolve the species upwards? Somebody can send me a letter and help me with that. There's no right, we're told by this administration, to openly believe homosexuality is wrong without encroaching on a possibility of a hate crime. We're not haters as Christians, we're lovers. And some don't understand it. They figure you disagree, you must hate them. I've embraced and loved people that I knew were doing things that were wrong for them and wrong for society. I can love them, you can love them. And we're given, for those who are Christians, how we are to act in the Beatitudes as individuals. And that's the way we are to treat each other individually. But for whatever reason, God has blessed this country and given us the chance to have the people be the government. As a government, you have a different role. You're not expected to turn the other cheek when your nation and the nation's people are attacked. You're not required to sit around for 20 hours after an act of war kills an ambassador. You protect the people. You provide for the common defense. That's Romans 13. The government is supposed to be an encourager of good conduct. But verse 4 says, but if you do evil, be afraid. That's the government's role. That's why I could look someone in the eye who I've forgiven individually and send them to prison as a judge. My buddy John Carter, also a former district judge, said a guy told him, Judge, I hear you're a Christian. You're supposed to forgive me. And Judge Carter said, son, I do forgive you with all my heart, but the state of Texas is sending you to prison for 20 years. There's a difference between the government and an individual conduct. And we are in a country for at least a little while longer, and perhaps if we have our actions blessed by God, maybe 200 more years. But we're in a country where the people are the government, and it's time to act like it. But when you have a government who has a war also against the Second Amendment, and you have an email after Fast and Furious within the government basically saying, well, yeah, we got caught with this Fast and Furious, but don't you think we can still use the fact that these guns were sent to Mexico to push for more gun control? Sounded to me like we got the motive for Fast and Furious. And yet this Justice Department has done more to go after people who leaked Fast and Furious than they ever had to bring to justice people who are responsible for the deaths of hundreds of Mexicans and at least a couple of Americans, and the list will probably grow. So, knowing as we do about Fast and Furious, I could not believe whoever put these words in the president's teleprompter in Mexico back on May the 3rd. The gall of whoever put these words in the teleprompter. But those words are as follows: from our president's lips to the Mexican people, who this president should have stood up and said, I am sorry. Please forgive us for the hundreds that have been killed of Mexicans because we forced guns to be sold to people that shouldn't have had them. Our government did that. I am so sorry. And we'll bring to justice those behind Fast and Furious. It's not what he said. Here's what he said. We recognize that most of the guns used to commit violence here in Mexico come from the United States. In America, our Constitution guarantees our individual right to bear arms, and as President, I swore an oath to uphold that right and always will. At the same time, as I've said back home, I will continue to do everything in my power to pass common sense gun reforms that keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people, reforms that will save lives in both of our countries. Meanwhile, we'll keep increasing the pressure on the gun traffickers who bring illegal guns into Mexico, and we'll keep putting these criminals where they belong, behind bars. That takes gall. A simple apology to the people of Mexico would have been far more appropriate than that hypocrisy. On Obamacare, I was visiting a senior citizen retirement community recently, and an elderly lady, Afro-American, said, Congressman, we're concerned about our Medicare. And I said, you should be. Obamacare cut $700 billion from Medicare to help seniors in order to help fund Obamacare. And she looked at me cynically and said, was that Obamacare or was that Louie Care? And I said, ma'am, you just need to read Obamacare if you can, because they cut $700 billion out of your care they pitted you against young people. Under Obamacare, the IPAB board you've already heard explain, okay, maybe it's not technically a death panel, but they will decide who gets a pacemaker and who doesn't. They'll decide who gets what surgeries and who doesn't, who gets bypass and who doesn't. That's not deciding who will live or die, but it does decide what the president said we should in the town hall he had right there in the White House, when a woman said, my mother has lived 10 years after getting a pacemaker, but I'm worried under Obamacare if it passes, she'd be too old. And basically, after beating around the bush, he said, maybe we're better off just telling your mom to take the pain pill. He did say that. Folks, this is a dangerous, dangerous road. Not that we might go down, but we have been going down. It's time to turn it around. The best part of Obamacare, though, got to warm your heart, the federal government and General Electric is contracted by this administration, will get all of your medical, psychiatric records, psychological. They'll get every detail of your personal life before they help you decide what taxes to pay, what health care you get. This is serious stuff, folks. And what about who goes to college? I was an exchange student in 1973 to the real Soviet Union. And I got to be friends with college students, but over there I couldn't believe it. You have no say in whether you go to college or not. It was all up to the Soviet Union, the government. They told you who went to college and who didn't. And now under Nancy Pelosi, Harry Reid, President Obama, this administration, this government has taken over all lending for college loans. Our federal government will decide who can have a loan to go to college. So Raphael, when you talk about things that remind you of Cuba, I'm seeing more and more things that remind me of the Soviet Union I spent the summer in. You think about Benghazi. Our Americans were betrayed. They were owed better. And the American people, the majority, understand that. And it's time to quit beating around the bush and get answers. If we have to subpoena everybody in this administration to get answers, it's time. You want to know about Iraq? Well, whether you agree with going in or not, the surge under General Petraeus turned the tide, and we had won in Iraq, and this administration took over and basically has given the influence that we could have had, did have. That influence is now possessed by Iran. This president said he wanted a status of forces agreement, so we'd have a little say there to make sure radicals didn't take over, but he didn't get it done. So the radicals are taking over. In Afghanistan, where so many Americans have given their lives, about 3/4 of those killed in Afghanistan have been killed while this president was commander-in-chief. Most people don't know that. And yet, he is turning the country over to the radicals that we originally defeated. We had less than 500 Americans in country. That's a way to fight a war. Give your allies some weapons, less than 500 Americans. We had no American casualties. The Taliban was defeated, and then we added occupiers, and that has never worked in that part of the world. How do people not know that? I mean, they taught me that at Texas A&M. I got a real education. Somebody tried to tell me, but Alexander the Great, he occupied it. No, he didn't, and he died leaving. To me, that's not a win. We have taken a win and turned it into a loss. But as some of our former allies that have been betrayed and thrown under the bus by this administration told me, you could change the course of history in Afghanistan. The Taliban are stronger than ever. You've released people from Guantanamo and other places. They're back in charge of the Taliban. You could still save Afghanistan. All you have to do is get us an amendment that says we can elect our own governor, elect our own mayor, pick our own police chief. I said, really? You can't do that now? They said, no, the president, under the Constitution you guys gave us, the president of Afghanistan appoints all of those people. He said, if you let us elect our local leaders, we will be able to have a strong federalist government like you had, and we can keep the Taliban from taking over. But if you leave us like it is now, the Taliban will be right back in charge, and all your American lives that were spilled with ours will be for nothing. I said, what makes you think we could have any say in that? And he said, you know how much our budget is of the Afghanistan government? No. $12.5 billion approximately in your money. But you know how much we provide in Afghanistan? No, how much? About $1.5 billion. Other governments, mainly yours, pay the rest. If you demand that we elect our local leaders, we will be able to elect our local leaders. And I say let them elect their leaders, and let's quit losing American lives in Afghanistan. We never should have. We won without a loss of life. We got to learn these lessons. We should not be in the nation building business. It's cost us almost our own nation. The FBI, they have purged their training material so that, as one agent said, we're blinded to see our own enemy. In Syria, we have absolutely no business getting in the middle of that mess. All right, it's time to force Congress to provide for the common defense. And when my friends up here say Congress can make a difference, I know there's some in Congress that say, well, the president is doing these things. He's got the executive branch. How can we do it? We have the purse strings, and nobody can get a dime of money unless we approve it. So help us stiffen the backbones of some of the folks at the top of Congress on the Republican side. Even though it warms my heart to know that our friends like Senator Schumer and Reid, President Obama, so many of the Democrats now care so desperately about the future of the Republican Party. They're warning us, oh, if you don't do what we say, gosh, we may not win, you may not ever win as Republicans another national election. Well, oh yeah, we'll take that chance. We'll run our own party. You've done enough damage to yours in the country, let us run our own. And we need Republican leaders who understand that. You don't go run and cower when a Democrat says you better do what I say or you might not win another election. It's time to force the Senate to follow the people's will or be gone. It's time to completely eliminate the IRS. It's time to defund every federal agency and department and executive house till they stop the war on American ideals, till they stop trying to replace the American dream with a socialist nightmare. God put us in a place to do something. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get her done. Thank you very much.